Before the foundations of anything you can name were laid, before the first stone of the first city was set into the earth, before the first king raised his hand over the first people and declared a beginning, there was a conversation. Not between men. Not in any language that has ever been spoken by a human mouth. In the language that exists before language, the language that matter itself is written in, the language that holds the instructions for how light moves and how time bends and how the sequence of everything that has ever happened points, with the precision of something that was never going to arrive at any other conclusion, toward this specific day. Toward you. Toward the moment that was designated yours before you had a body to inhabit, before you had a name that the people around you could use to call you small, before the world that was waiting for you had any idea what was coming or how completely unprepared it was for the arrival it had been building toward without knowing it. God declared it. Not suggested. Not proposed. Not offered as one possible outcome among several, contingent on the cooperation of circumstances and the agreement of the people who would one day stand in your proximity. Declared. With the specific, irreversible, non-negotiable authority that belongs only to the voice that speaks things into existence rather than waiting for existence to permit them. The authority that does not consult the room before it fills the room. The authority that does not ask the world if it is ready before it sends what the world needs. Your birthday was not the event that the people in the room decided it was. It was the event that was declared before any of them existed. Hold that. Feel the full weight of what I am telling you. Because the distance between those two things, between the declared event and the room's interpretation of it, is the distance between who you have been operating as and who you actually are. And that distance, traversed fully, changes everything about how you move through every room you will ever walk into for the rest of your life. There is a thing that happens to people who are present for a declaration they did not understand. They respond to what they could see rather than what was actually occurring. They respond to the physical event, the surface level disruption, the immediate practical implications of the new thing that had arrived in their space. And because the physical event and the declared event are not the same thing, because what God declared and what the room witnessed were operating at completely different frequencies, the room's response was always going to be inadequate. Was always going to be a response to something smaller than what was actually happening. Every person who minimized your arrival was responding to the frequency they could hear. They could not hear the frequency the declaration was carried on. But you could. Not always consciously. Not always in a form that you could articulate or defend or present as evidence against the room's smaller interpretation of what you were. But in the body, in the specific quality of knowing that runs beneath all the noise of learned self-doubt and accumulated outside opinion, in the place where the original declaration is still broadcasting on the frequency it was first sent on, in that place, you have always known. Something about your presence in the world was not ordinary. Not in the self-aggrandizing sense of someone who needs to be extraordinary in order to feel significant. In the specific, sober, almost uncomfortable sense of someone who has been sitting with a knowledge that exceeds what the environment around them was built to confirm, and who has spent years trying to reconcile the gap between what they carry on the inside and what the outside was willing to receive. That gap is the gap between the declared birthday and the room's response to it. And today, that gap closes. Let me tell you what a birthday declaration from God actually looks like, because it is not what the word suggests on its surface. It is not a celebration in the ordinary sense. It is not the warm, comfortable, cake and candles event that the human version of birthdays has been shaped into. A declaration of your day from the source that declared it is something far more serious, far more consequential, far more demanding than any celebration. It is a commissioning. Every person whose arrival was declared rather than accidental carries, alongside the fact of their existence, a corresponding set of instructions. Not written in any book. Not delivered in any single moment of clear revelation that could be pointed to and dated. Delivered in the accumulated texture of every season they have lived through, every quality they developed under pressure, every capacity that emerged specifically from the conditions they were placed into. The instructions are not separate from the life. The instructions are the life, read correctly. You have been living your instructions without always understanding that is what you were doing. The difficulty you move through is instruction. Not punishment, instruction. The specific, targeted, precisely calibrated development of the exact capacities that the assignment requires from the person carrying it. No king who ever earned a throne received it without the specific seasons of formation that produced the person capable of holding it. No person whose arrival was declared without preparation was sent in without preparation. The preparation simply does not always look like preparation from inside it. From inside it, it looks like hardship. It looks like delay. It looks like the inexplicable resistance of a world that seems determined to make the forward motion as costly as possible. It looks like every version of too much that you have ever been handed in a season when you had already been carrying too much for too long. That was your formation. And your formation is complete. Not in the sense that growth is finished. Growth is never finished. In a person who stops growing has confused arrival with destination. Complete in the sense that the specific set of capacities required for the specific assignment you were declared for are now present in you. Fully. Tested and confirmed through the exact seasons they needed to be tested and confirmed in. Available for deployment in the exact moment they were always going to be needed. This is your birthday in the fullest sense of the word. Not the annual calendar event. The actual birthday, the day when everything that was declared before your first breath is fully, finally, completely available in the person you have become. The day when the gap between the declaration and the room's response closes not because the room expanded but because you stepped out of the room's measurement entirely and began to be measured only by the declaration. This is that day. I want to tell you something about the nature of divine timing because it is the thing that has been most difficult for you to trust in the seasons when the declaration felt impossibly distant from the daily reality. Divine timing does not operate on the calendar that human urgency produces. Human urgency says, it should have happened by now. Human urgency measures the gap between where it is and where it wants to be and converts that gap into evidence of failure, delay, perhaps the quiet possibility that what was believed about the arrival was wrong. Human urgency is the voice that has been telling you, in the seasons when the forward motion felt too slow, that the declaration was perhaps not as absolute as it appeared, that perhaps there were conditions attached that had not been met, perhaps the commissioning was contingent on a performance that had not yet been delivered sufficiently. Human urgency is a liar. Divine timing moves according to a completely different calculation. It moves according to the readiness of the person being prepared, which cannot be rushed without producing a version of the person that is insufficiently formed for the scale of the assignment. It moves according to the readiness of the world to receive what is coming, which requires the specific configuration of circumstances and people and open doors that cannot be forced into existence but that assemble, with the patient precision of something that is moving toward an inevitable conclusion, in exactly the order they are needed. It moves according to the declaration, not the anxiety. And the declaration said, this day. Not the day you chose. Not the day your urgency demanded. Not the day that would have been most convenient for the version of you that existed 3 seasons ago and needed the confirmation before the formation was complete. This day. The day that was always designated, always on the schedule that was set before you had any say in the schedule, always the day when everything that was declared would be fully and finally present in the person the declaration was about. You have been on time the whole time. The seasons that felt like delay were not delay. They were the specific duration required to build the specific thing. The seasons that felt like the declaration had been forgotten were not seasons of divine forgetfulness. They were seasons of divine investment, the sustained, patient, extraordinarily careful work of producing, in a person who is going to carry something significant, the exact quality of character that significant things require. Let me speak now about what was being built in the seasons that felt most like nothing was building. When the external world goes quiet around a person whose assignment is large, it is not evidence of abandonment. It is evidence of the specific phase of formation that requires the interior to be developed without the distraction of external confirmation. The most important things that were built in you were built in seasons when nothing visible was happening. In the hours of private wrestling with questions that had no available answers. In the long, unglamorous, completely unwitnessed work of continuing to move towards something you could not yet see clearly. In those seasons, the declaration was not paused. The formation was accelerating. There is a specific quality that only develops in the absence of external confirmation. A specific kind of rootedness, not the rootedness of a plant that grew in ideal conditions with consistent water and sufficient light, but the rootedness of something that learned to find its water far below the surface in seasons when the surface offered nothing. That deep root system, developed in the dry seasons, is the thing that holds when what arrives in the abundant season would overwhelm something whose roots only reached the topsoil. The dry seasons produced your depth. And depth is the thing that the declaration always required from you specifically, because what was declared for you is not a surface assignment. It is not the kind of thing that can be held by someone whose stability depends on consistent external nourishment. It requires the specific, deep water stability of someone who knows how to remain intact when the surface conditions are unfavorable. You know how. You learned in the seasons that felt most like punishment and were most like preparation. Now I want to speak about the people who were placed in your proximity in this season. Not all of them. Not the full catalog of relationships that the accumulated years have produced. But the specific ones, the ones who arrived recently, or who have been in your circle for longer but whose significance is only now becoming fully visible, who are not in your life by accident or by the ordinary social mechanics of proximity and shared interest. They were placed. Not in the conspiratorial sense of people being moved around by an external hand in ways that remove their own agency. In the sense that when a declaration is moving toward its fulfillment, the specific people required to support the fulfillment begin to appear. Not because they were recruited or assigned, but because the frequency of a life moving into its declared purpose is recognizable to people who are operating on the same frequency, and those people, drawn by the recognition, find their way into proximity. Look at who has arrived. Look at the specific qualities they carry. Look at what they bring that you do not already have. Look at the way the combination of what you carry and what they carry produces something that neither of you could produce alone. This is not coincidence. This is the assembly of the people that the assignment requires, happening with the patient, precise, completely unforced efficiency of something that is moving according to a plan that was laid before any of you were born. The team for the next season is forming. Some of them you already know. Some of them are in your proximity right now, and the full significance of their presence has not yet been recognized by either of you. Some of them will arrive in the weeks ahead, and the recognition will be immediate, not the warm, social recognition of two people who simply enjoy each other's company, but the specific, almost startling recognition of two people who understand, without having to explain it, that they have found someone whose presence was required for what they are both moving toward. Receive them. Not with the careful, conditional, testing for worthiness posture of someone whose trust was broken in previous seasons and who learned to protect the interior access by making the qualification process long and difficult. With the open, discerning, simultaneously available, and boundaried reception of someone who knows their own value clearly enough that they do not need to manage it through withholding. The people arriving in this season were sent. They passed a qualification process that was not yours to administer. Receive them as what they are. Let me tell you what God declares when He declares a birthday. He does not declare a day of ease. He does not sign the declaration with a promise that what follows will be smooth, uncontested, free from the specific quality of difficulty that has always accompanied the lives of the people whose arrivals were declared rather than accidental. He declares a day of authorization. Authorization is different from ease. Authorization is the moment when everything that was built in the formation seasons, every capacity, every depth of root, every tested and confirmed quality that the previous seasons produced, is formally released for use at full scale. The authorization is the declaration that the formation is sufficient, that the person who is being prepared is prepared, that the assignment which was always theirs is now theirs to carry openly, at full capacity, without the managed, careful, conserved deployment that the formation seasons required. You have been managing your own capacity for a long time, not because the capacity was not real, because the formation required it to be developed under controlled conditions before it was deployed at scale. The manager of great fire keeps the fire contained while it is being built so that when it is released, its full force is available and directed. You have been containing the fire, not suppressing it. The fire was never suppressible, and the seasons when it was most contained were also the seasons when it was burning hottest at its core. Containing it, directing it inward for the work of formation rather than outward for the work of assignment. Today, the containment ends. The authorization that was declared before your first breath is present in this moment in a way it has not been present in any previous moment of your life. Not because the declaration changed, it did not. Because you are now the person the declaration was describing. The formation is complete. The depth is real. The specific combination of quality and capacity and tested resilience and hard-won clarity that the assignment requires is now present in the person who is declared to carry it. The fire is authorized to move. I have sat in the presence of many commissionings across the long centuries of my reign. I have watched the moment when a person who is formed for something great receives the confirmation that the formation is finished and the deployment is beginning. I have seen it in the faces of generals on the eve of campaigns that changed the shape of nations. I have seen it in the eyes of people who had no armies and no resources but who carried something in the quality of their presence that reorganized every room they entered. What I have seen in every one of those moments is this: the person did not look relieved. They looked settled. Not the giddy, disbelieving settlement of someone who did not expect to arrive at the moment they had been working toward. The deep, quiet, almost grave settlement of someone who recognizes the moment they have been moving toward for a very long time and understands, in the full weight of that recognition, exactly what it means and exactly what it costs and exactly what it will require. You are at that moment. The settlement you feel, if you are feeling it, and I believe you are, because it is the natural emotional signature of a declaration being received by the person it was declared for, is not complacency. It is not the false peace of someone who stopped caring about the outcome. It is the specific peace of a person whose interior account has finally aligned with the external moment, whose inside and outside have stopped running at different frequencies, whose private knowledge of what they carry has finally, in this season, been confirmed by the world around them in ways that make the private knowledge no longer necessary to defend. The defense is over. What was always true is now visible. Now let me speak about what your birthday requires from you in the practical, immediate, daily sense of the word requires. Because declarations do not exempt the people they are made about from the work. The declaration is the authorization. The work is still yours. The first requirement is full presence, not the managed, filtered, carefully curated presence of someone who is still deciding how much of themselves to bring into the current moment based on an ongoing assessment of whether the current moment is safe enough to receive the full version. The full, unmanaged, unfiltered, completely inhabiting presence of someone who has received the authorization and is operating inside it. Full presence is the thing that the people who were placed in your proximity in this season are responding to. They are not responding to the managed version. They cannot fully respond to the managed version because the managed version is, by definition, a reduced version, and what they were sent to encounter is the full one. Show up as the full one. The second requirement is the release of the timeline that human urgency produced. You have been carrying a timeline that was built from the outside in, from the accumulation of what other people your age had accomplished, what the markers of progress in your specific field suggested you should have achieved by specific points, what the internal voice of urgency told you should have already done. That timeline belongs to the managed season. It was built for a version of your life that was operating under a declaration that was not yet fully received. The declared timeline is different. It does not care what other people your age have accomplished. It does not measure your progress against the markers that were built to measure the progress of people who were not declared for what you were declared for. It measures only one thing: the readiness of the person for the assignment. And readiness is not a function of age or external markers of accomplishment. It is a function of formation, and your formation is complete. Release the urgency timeline. The declared timeline is already on schedule. The third requirement is the claiming of the inheritance that the declaration carries. Every commissioning is also a transfer. The authorization to carry the assignment is always accompanied by the specific resources, tangible and intangible, visible and not yet visible, that the assignment requires. These resources do not always arrive before the work begins. Sometimes they arrive as the work is in motion, drawn by the forward momentum of a person who has claimed the authorization and begun to move inside it rather than waiting for the full provision before taking the first step. But the claiming must happen first. Claiming is not demanding. It is not the aggressive assertion of an entitlement that has not been earned. It is the quiet, settled, internal recognition that what was declared is yours, not because you want it or deserve it in the way prizes are deserved, but because it was assigned. Because the declaration named you. Because the formation was yours and the assignment is yours, and the resources that accompany the assignment are therefore yours, present in the declared future that is moving toward you at the exact pace of your movement toward it. Claim it. Not out loud. Not as a performance for an audience. In the interior of your own understanding of what this day is and what it means and what it is authorized and what is now moving in your direction with the patient, unstoppable force of something that was always going to arrive at this moment. There is a fourth requirement that nobody names because it is the most uncomfortable one. The requirement of witness. Not the performative witness of someone who documents their own arrival for an audience. That is not witness, that is broadcast. And broadcast is a management tool, not an assignment tool. The witness I am speaking of is the internal act of seeing yourself clearly in this moment, of refusing the habit of looking past the present victory toward the next challenge so quickly that the present victory is never actually received, of standing fully in the moment of your birthday without immediately converting it into a launch pad for the next thing. Receive this day, not as a brief station on the way to somewhere more significant, as the day that was declared, as worthy of the full, unhurried weight of your attention and your gratitude and your unperformed, private, completely genuine recognition that what was announced is what arrived and the arrival is real and the day is real and you are real inside it in a way that deserves to be felt completely before it is used for anything. I want to speak now about what changes after a birthday. Not the small, annual changes that accumulate gradually and are barely perceptible in any given moment. The large change. The fundamental shift in the quality of experience that happens when the person you have been becoming in the moment that was declared for that person finally occupy the same space at the same time. The world responds differently to a person who has received their declaration. Not because the world changed, because the person changed the frequency they are broadcasting on. The managed, conserved, still in formation version of a person broadcasts on a frequency that corresponds to a work in progress, in the world, sensing the incompleteness, responds with the particular ambivalence that is always reserved for things that have not yet arrived at their final form. The unmanaged, fully formed, declaration received version of a person broadcasts on a completely different frequency. In the world, when it encounters that frequency, responds with the specific alignment of circumstances and people and open doors and available resources that has no other name except the word that people who do not want to believe in declarations use to explain things they cannot explain. They call it luck. You know what it is. It is the world responding to the declaration. It is the specific, systematic, completely reliable alignment of everything external with what was announced internally in the moment the declaration was received. It is not luck. It is not coincidence. It is the natural behavior of a world that was built to respond to declarations with the full weight of its capacity to confirm what was announced. Watch for this confirmation, not with the anxious watching of someone who needs the external confirmation to believe the internal declaration is real. The relaxed, expecting, completely unsurprised watching of someone who knows what was declared and is simply observing the sequence by which the confirmation moves through the physical world toward them. Things are going to happen in the next season that people around you are going to call luck. You will not call them that. You will call them by their right name. Now I want to address the people who are watching for your ending on the day your birthday was being declared. Because they exist. They are real. And their story on this day is not the one they plan to be living. The people who organized against you, the ones who studied your compressed seasons and concluded that the compression was your permanent state, who built their positions on the architecture of your supposed limitations, who staked their version of events on a future where you remained exactly as small as the managed season had made you appear, those people are encountering something today that they do not have a framework to process. They are encountering the declared version of you. Not the version they knew. Not the version they mapped and measured and determined they could manage. The version that was always underneath the managed one, always building in the directions the management could not monitor, always becoming more precisely what the declaration described while they were busy confirming to each other that the declaration could not possibly apply to someone like you. They are wrong in a way that has no correction available to it. Not because the correction would require too much. Corrections that require too much can still be made, with sufficient humility in sufficient effort. But because the correction would require them to dismantle the entire architecture of their position, which was built on the wrong foundation, which means every floor above the foundation is also wrong, which means there is nothing to repair and everything to rebuild from the ground. Most people do not rebuild from the ground. They manage the visible damage and pretend the foundation is solid. The cracks that are forming in the structure of their position today are the direct result of a birthday they did not account for, a declaration they could not hear, a formation they could not track because it happened in the interior of a person they had already decided to stop taking seriously. They dismissed the birthday. The birthday did not dismiss them. It simply arrived without asking for their acknowledgement and began doing what declared birthdays always do, reorganizing the reality around the person they belong to with the complete, impersonal, utterly uninterested in their comfort efficiency of something that was always going to happen and is happening now. Watch them scramble. Not with satisfaction directed at their scrambling, that is still energy directed at them, and they have had enough of your energy. With the calm, informed, completely unsurprised recognition of someone who understands exactly what they are witnessing. The specific, predictable, fully documented behavior of people who built their position on a wrong assumption and are now living inside the consequence of that building. They will try to reframe. The reframe will be visible in the way that all reframes are visible when the person producing them is doing so under pressure rather than from a position of genuine clarity. It will have the quality of something assembled quickly from whatever was available rather than something that grew organically from an honest accounting of the situation. It will have the scene showing. You do not need to respond to the reframe. The declaration responds to it simply by continuing to be what it is. A birthday that was declared does not require defense against the people who were not invited to the declaration. It requires only the occupation of what was declared. The full, unhurried, completely undefensive inhabitation of the person whose birthday it is and the life that the birthday authorizes. That inhabitation is the most devastating possible response to every reframe they will attempt. Not because it defeats them. You are not here to defeat them. You are here to inhabit your declaration. But because a person who is fully inhabiting their declaration has no energy available to spend on the scrambling of people whose plans did not survive contact with the reality of what was declared, you simply will not have the bandwidth to track their reframes while you are living inside your authorization. They will be loud and you will be gone, not physically, but in the sense that matters, which is the sense of whose narrative has your attention. Your narrative has your attention now, and it was declared before theirs existed. Now I want to tell you something about the specific quality of what happens on the birthday that God declares. There is a release that accompanies it. Not a release from responsibility or from the work or from the specific, costly, demanding requirements of the assignment. A release from the weight that was necessary to carry during the formation. The weight of uncertainty. The weight of the gap between the private knowledge and the external confirmation. The weight of being further in your interior understanding of what you carry than the world around you is yet prepared to confirm. That weight was real. It was the specific, sustained, daily weight of a person who has been living at a frequency that their current circumstances have not yet caught up to. The weight of someone who sees clearly what is coming before it arrives and who must continue to function effectively in the present tense reality of a world that has not yet seen what they can see. This weight does not disappear all at once, but it lightens, measurably, in ways you will notice first in the quality of the morning, in the specific texture of waking up inside a life that is beginning to correspond to the declaration rather than running in parallel to it. You will notice it in the quality of your own voice when you speak about what you are building. The tentativeness that was the behavioral residue of the gap between declaration and confirmation will be replaced by something that does not need a name because it simply feels like truth moving through a person who is no longer managing their relationship with it. You will sound like yourself. Fully. For the first time perhaps in a long time. Not the version of yourself that was shaped by the first room's assessment or the managed season's requirements or the accumulated weight of carrying a declaration in a world that was not yet ready to receive it. The version that was always present at the core, always there, always broadcasting on the declared frequency, always the actual person beneath every adaptation the circumstances required. That version is what today authorizes. Let me address something directly. Because I have watched too many people receive their declaration and then immediately begin to negotiate it, to find reasons why the full scope of what was declared is perhaps more than they are ready for, perhaps more than is appropriate to claim, perhaps something that should be approached gradually rather than inhabited fully in the moment of authorization. This negotiation is the last work of the managed season trying to extend its tenure into the declared one. The managed season was necessary. Its requirements were real and its lessons were essential, and nothing about it should be dismissed or reframed or bypassed in the rush toward what comes after. But it is over. And the habits it produced, the habits of conservation, of managing capacity, of approaching expansion carefully and incrementally, those habits were the right habits for the season they were built in, and they are the wrong habits for the season that has now been declared. You do not gradually inhabit a declaration. You receive it fully, in the moment it is given, with the complete understanding that what is being offered is not a trial version or a partial authorization or the first installment of something that will be delivered in stages as you demonstrate sufficient worthiness. It is the full declaration. It is the complete authorization. It is the total inheritance of a person whose formation is finished and whose assignment is now fully in their hands. Receive it fully. The birthday that was declared for you is not behind you and it is not ahead of you. It is this moment. The present moment, this exact intersection of everything you have been and everything you are becoming and everything that was declared for you before you had the capacity to receive the declaration, is the birthday. Not a date on a calendar that happens once a year and accumulates into a count. The specific moment when everything that was announced intersects with everything that was built and produces the specific, fully formed, declaration-aligned version of a person who is ready. You are ready. Not in the conditional sense of the word that the managed season trained you to use. Ready as in almost there. Ready as in with a few more preparations. Ready as in when the circumstances are slightly more favorable and the confirmation is slightly more visible and the gap between the declaration and the confirmation is slightly smaller. Ready. Fully. Right now. The declaration is not waiting for your conditions. The declaration already declared its conditions and met them in you. I have watched kings receive their crowns who were not ready, and I have watched people receive their authorization who had no crown and were fully ready, and I can tell you without any equivocation which of those two categories produces the outcomes that last beyond the person who produced them. Readiness is not a title. It is a condition of the interior. It is the specific state of a person whose formation is complete and whose declaration is received and whose full capacity is available and directed and no longer conserved for a season that has already passed. You are in that state. This is your birthday, not the celebration your circumstances have prepared for you. The birthday that was declared in the language that matter itself is written in the conversation that happened before the foundations of anything you can name were laid. In the moment when the voice that speaks things into existence looked at the sequence of everything it was building and saw, precisely where you are standing right now, the specific person that sequence was always pointing toward, and declared, this one, this arrival, this person, in this moment, carrying everything the formation produced, authorized for everything the assignment requires, released from the managed season into the declared one. This birthday, yours. Receive it. The whole thing. Without negotiation. Without the managed, incremental, permission-seeking approach of a person who has not yet fully understood that the permission was given before the request was formed. The declaration preceded you. The authorization is complete. The birthday is now. Rise into it. Not gradually. Not with the careful, testing each step approach of someone who needs to confirm the ground before they commit their full weight to it. The ground is confirmed. The declaration confirmed it. Step into your birthday with every pound of what you are. This is the day that was announced before the world knew your name. The world knows it now. And everything that was declared for the person whose name it is has been waiting here, in this moment, for exactly this long. For the exact arrival of the exact person that the declaration described. You arrived. Exactly on time. Exactly as declared. Happy birthday.